Hello and welcome to Bud Explains, where I take a subject, be that rules, history, or a concept from the role-playing world, and try to explain it to you in a way that I hope helps you understand how it works. Today's explanation is Sanity in Delta Green, the role-playing game. This is broken down into 6 sections that are all interconnected but fairly easy to understand as a whole. Willpower, the breaking point, temporary insanity, disorders, permanent insanity, and adaptation. First, let's look at willpower. This is a pool of points that are equal to the agent's power score. It represents a kind of mental fuel that can be burned in order to hold fast in the face of situations where mental reserves of strength are needed. This includes, but is not limited to, exhaustion, resisting persuasion, resisting terror, and bouts of mental infirmity, and occasionally to resist or enact unnatural rituals. It is a pool of points that is depleted over time, but can be restored in various ways. If an agent's willpower is reduced to 1 or 2, then they have an emotional breakdown and take a minus 20% penalty to all rolls until it rises again. When it hits 0, they are burned out and they collapse, incapacitated and under control of the handler until it reaches at least 1, and no tests can be succeeded on a roll. Willpower can be regained most easily by a full night's sleep, which recharges D6, but in addition to this, a player using one of their motivations in a way that the handler finds agreeable can cause an agent to regain 1 point, which could just be enough to get them out of trouble. If an agent develops a sleeping disorder, this can prevent them from regenerating willpower points, as they can often wake up in a state of terror. Mechanically, willpower is used by projecting SAN loss onto a bond. In a situation where SAN would be lost, the agent may spend points of willpower to offset this. There's always D4, which is rolled, and then the SAN loss is immediately reduced by this amount. This can drop an agent's willpower to 0. The bond that they are projecting onto is also reduced by the same rolled amount, and then they need to make a note of how this will manifest with the next encounter with that particular bond. Similarly, temporary bouts of insanity can be repressed by using willpower points in the same way. Roll D4, reduce both the willpower score and bond by that amount, and then make a SAN check. If the agent succeeds and they have at least 1 willpower point left, they can bury that episode deep within by describing how that bond might help them carry on. Failure makes events transpire as normal. By the same measure, this needs to be played out when the bond and agent next meet. Another aspect of the sanity system in Delta Green is the breaking point. This is the point at which the loss of SAN will trigger a long-term mental disorder and is equal to their starting SAN minus their power. The instant SAN loss hits this point, they gain a disorder and the breaking point is reset to equal the new SAN score minus power. SAN loss in Delta Green is always rolled on their current sanity, and success diminishes the loss, potentially to 0, with failure meaning a greater loss. A critical success means that they lose the absolute minimum. For example, if the loss was D6, then only 1 point is lost. A fumble means they lose the maximum they could have lost, which as per the previous example is 6. There are 3 major threats to sanity in Delta Green: violence, helplessness, and the unnatural, and of course these categories can overlap. Killing people, as you might expect, is harmful to sanity. In combat, SAN must be tested for a trauma the first time it happens in that fight. There are various losses for suffering and inflicting violence, from being ambushed by gunfire to killing an innocent in cold blood. Helplessness can make violence worse and vice versa. This can range from being fired from your job to being jailed to seeing a bond being gruesomely killed. Lastly is the unnatural, the things man was not meant to see or attempt to understand. It is described as wounding our sense of connection to the world by causing huge gaps in our understanding. Should an encounter with the unnatural result in 0 SAN loss, it means that they have either adapted to the reality that the unnatural has created in some way, or flat out denied it, refusing to acknowledge it could exist. But as with these kind of things, it is left for the player to explain. Insanity and disorders in Delta Green are gained through SAN loss. If an agent loses 5 or more points of SAN in a single roll, they suffer a temporary insanity. If SAN loss takes them to or beyond their breaking point, they gain a disorder, and if SAN rises again, the disorder remains. If they ever reach 0 SAN, they are permanently insane and become an NPC. Okay, so let's talk about temporary insanity in more detail. If the trigger is hit, i.e. 5 or more SAN loss in a single roll, then the agent temporarily loses control, resulting in one of 3 possible outcomes: flee, struggle, or submit, which of course should be worked out with the handler. The flee outcome results in, yes you've guessed it, running away at top speed from the cause of the SAN loss for a number of turns equal to their con score, whereupon they collapse to the ground exhausted, or until they find somewhere they feel safe. The next outcome, struggle, is lashing out at the nearest threat no matter how unstoppable it appears. They will fight until they are killed, knocked unconscious, or restrained. The submit outcome means them shutting down or passing out from the shock and a state of paralysed catatonia. All 3 of these reactions are common. Disorders, as previously explained, are gained when an agent reaches their breaking point. They're all negative in the long term, but obviously some can be more severe than others and have different onset time from mere hours after the trauma to months later. The exact nature of the disorder is left to be negotiated with the handler, though it should always be appropriate. Disorders can lead to acute episodes. Whenever they lose SAN and are facing something that could pertain directly to the disorder, they must make a second SAN roll. If this has failed, then the disorder takes over along with the internal logic associated with it. This results in the agent being either unable to or only able to take certain actions. Those agents skilled in psychotherapy can generally talk people down or reduce the impact of the disorder, enabling the agent to gain some measure of self-control. Upon hitting 0 SAN, the agent is lost and no therapy or treatment can ever restore them, and they will usually become either catatonic, manic or psychopathic. Catatonic characters are completely separated from reality, no longer communicating and just stare into space, only eating or drinking when prompted, with some not even reacting to physical pain. Manic characters become delusional and rave to themselves, unable to hold a cogent conversation. They become certain that their truth is the real truth and cannot be dissuaded of their reality. Psychopathic characters have had their empathy completely burned out, their sense of guilt disintegrated, and no longer view people as people. They are objects that are simply there for the amusement of the psychopath. It's worth pointing out that some psychopaths with 0 SAN can appear completely fine and present a visage of normality to all onlookers. Serial killers are notable for this ability. Just think about how many of these kind of people hold down jobs, have families, and who people say they seem so normal about when they are caught. SAN loss can not only be resisted by projecting onto bonds, but also by adapting. Agents can harden to trauma if it is survived often enough. The game mechanic is thus: if an agent loses SAN from either violence or helplessness 3 times in a row without going temporarily insane or hitting their breaking point, they become adapted. This is on the character sheet as 3 tickable boxes. If at any point the agent goes temporarily insane from these 2, the boxes should be cleared and the agent starts over. Once all 3 are ticked for either, the agent becomes adapted to that particular source and cannot suffer SAN loss from these again. Adaptations of Violence reduces their empathy towards other human beings. Their charisma score is permanently reduced by D6 and their bonds are all reduced by the same amount. Adaptation to Helplessness cripples their drive, reducing their power by D6. It's worth pointing out that though these could be potentially harmful, a roll of a 1 could only make a minor difference to their lives. In addition to all of this, an agent can never become adapted to the unnatural. You can only come to terms with it at 0 SAN. So to summarise, Willpower is a finite stat pool that can be used to offset SAN loss by projecting it onto bonds, but that can be regenerated with rest. The breaking point is the current SAN minus the agent's power score, and it is at this point at which disorders are gained. Temporary insanities are gained when an agent loses 5 or more SAN in one roll and results in either fleeing, fighting or submitting. 0 SAN makes a person either catatonic, manic or psychopathic. An agent can become adapted to violence and helplessness at a cost to their humanity, but the unnatural can never be adapted to and only stops being SAN reducing when that score reaches 0. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and share it, and make sure to subscribe for more Bud Explains videos in the future. Bud out.